list. Everybody. All right, now we're going to shift gears. Now that you all have sent over that one thought, we're going to talk about urban planners, and we're going to talk about urban planning. And the seed for this project started when people started talking about compact design, and I said, don't compact out trees. And then I realized that if you're not going to compact out trees, you needed to be working with planners, and that involved other what I called urban design professionals, including landscape architects. There's also public works. There's all these different things. So it's been kind of a year-long trek with some extra funding that we got to work on this project. We've been looking into this, and the idea was to say, how can we connect better? How can we connect urban forest groups better? Some of our groups do an excellent job. Ray, I'm sorry, Ray, I'm going to hold you up again. Ray, of course, was on the city council. You know, he connected really tightly with the city, but he was also one of those types in the 60s and 70s that just went to city council meetings as an individual. That's what you call a real community activist, just sitting in, seeing what the heck they were up to. So, but we're not telling you need to run for office today, okay? But we're going to concentrate more on planners, okay? But that is going to lead you into other places. And we're going to have some debate back and forth about this, about what you think about what works and what doesn't work, what's easy and what's not. And that's why I happened to meet Julia 7 years ago. And so Julia and I talked about how this could work. We did a survey, and if you were on our network list, that email list we talked about a few minutes ago, you would have gotten a survey for urban forest people to say, you know, do you talk to planners? Do you go to planning commission meetings? That sort of thing. And if you are a planner, because there are a few people in our audience who are on both lists, you would have gotten the one that we sent to planners. And Julia was super kind, being the president of the California Association, or California chapter of APA. She sent it out to those 7,000 planners. And we got 119 responses from planners. It's still open, as a matter of fact. I think you also sent it to some ASLA people. No, that didn't happen. Well, we figure we might continue this. I know that we've had people say we should continue this. So we had 119 planners, and we had 49 urban forest people. Now, some of you probably didn't fill it out. So you can go back, and we'll send out the link again, and you can still fill it out. It's still open, all right? It's always good to get more feedback. With the other thing I want to mention is that you also should have gotten a handout when you signed in that talks about working with local planners. This is just a glimpse of a preview of what we're going to be doing for resources. But at this point, I'm really delighted to introduce Julia, who has worked with a whole bunch of different groups. She's worked for the Strategic Growth Council. She was there when they started the Strategic Growth Council. She's also worked for UC Davis in their Land Use and Natural Resources program. She's been with Local Government Commission. She's also been with Institute for Local Government. And just recently, after becoming a consultant, she's been working with it's the COG for the whole state, so CalCog. You all have heard of COGS, right? Council of Governments. It's the Metropolitan Transportation Agency in California, essentially. In Sacramento, it's called SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And that's where they get the transportation funding from the feds. And it's where they bring in all they have representatives from all the cities in the area, and they talk together. So it's a regional approach to addressing what's going on. Instead of just going city by city, you can go talk to your COG. What's the COG in Southern California? SCAG? Really lovely names. Sandag, not a sandbag, Sandag. I don't know what's along the coast, but now you have a friend at the top. You know, you have a friend. So she's going to be working on the leadership program for the COGS, and I'm going to let you do it this. Now, what are you going to do?
Oh, well, so I'm going to be doing, I'll be director of education for CalCog. That's the current idea, working on leadership programs and webinars for them. And Cindy, of course, has already said, can we do something on trees? so we'll see what we can do. It's a new position. So I'm really thrilled to be here. The last time that I got invited to speak to urban foresters, I had money. It's when I was working with SGC and we had the Prop 84 funds. So I have no money now, but I do have people. And the first time I ever really understood the importance of trees was when I was working for a local government commission, and we started doing brochures for cities, working with the folks at UC Davis about what kinds of trees you should plant, what homeowners should plant in their yards, and the benefits of trees. And it kind of, a light bulb kind of went off in my head about how trees are this silver bullet. I mean, they solve so many issues, and not only that, but they do it beautifully, so to speak. So I'm again thrilled to be here. I'm really interested. Mostly, what I'd like to hear today is about how you think that planners can work with you all to reach our shared goals. And we'll talk a little bit about what planners thought the importance of trees were. And I think there are a lot of shared values. I was talking to Andy last night. I know that he's working really closely with, so the California chapter of the American Planning Association, 7,000 members divided up into 8 sections. So for example, there is a Los Angeles section, one of our larger sections, and they've been working with tree people on resiliency. And so there is an opportunity at a more local level to engage our sections, to put together workshops and trainings, and they can help you recruit planners to these events by offering continuing education credits and other resources. I will say, too, that we're in the process of developing a much stronger distance education program for our more far-flung members, so our members in the San Joaquin Valley, our members on the coast, and our members way up north. So we're hoping that we can collaborate with you all and get some of the events that you do or some of the issues that you're talking about into that webinar series and offer it to our planners in perpetuity. That's what I like about the webinars. All right, so let's, yeah. Oh, excellent, thank you. So we're just going to go through the survey really quickly. Cindy tells me that 119 responses is good.
Yeah. It's not 95% confidence and 5%. It was like 90 and 10 as far as, when you talk surveys. That's still damn good.
Yeah, so you'll see that we had folks from all over, and I think that, did you choose those areas to break them down into? Or did people self-select?
Some people added others.
Okay, all right. So you'll see we had a pretty good distribution. And we did get, so you'll see one of a planner from Australia chimed in.
I didn't add Australia to it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know how that happened, but I just thought that was pretty interesting. But you'll see that the pretty similar responses across the, and then under the planners, you see they kind of self-select a little bit more with Shasta and Sierra Nevada. But did you have anything you wanted to add about that? But I think it's a pretty good distribution. And it kind of tracks, at least the areas here track a lot of our sections and the sizes of our sections. So that's pretty interesting.
The only other thing I wanted to say, and that is 7,000 planners, 119 responses. There is no question that probably there was some self-selection of people who were interested in trees who responded to this, right? The people who really hate trees maybe didn't do it. So we have to figure that out, right? But this is a good place to start and try to figure out who your partners are.
Well, and I would say too that a lot of the smaller areas, at least in our sections, the local governments don't have a lot of staff capacity, and so they probably don't have folks who are working with trees, where some of the larger communities have sustainability coordinators, urban foresters, people who specifically are engaged in those kinds of activities.
One of the comments from a planner was in the Central Valley. They said, our cities are so small, we don't have anybody on staff. We work with consultants, so you have to be training the consultants. So that's something to keep in mind if you're in that kind of a community. So. Yeah.
All right. So, do planners love trees? Absolutely. 89% say they're important to include in developments and plans. And I think that those who don't think it's important probably don't understand trees. Just a little, side comment. But yes, planners really, we love trees. So why do we love trees? We love trees because I was saying they're kind of a silver bullet. They solve a lot of the issues that planners are having to deal with. So planners, if you're putting together a general plan, I'm assuming you all are somewhat familiar with the general plan. General plan plans the entire community. There's a lot of issues that have to be brought together at the local level. Well, trees address a lot of those challenges that we're facing at the local level. So whether it's the urban heat island, which we've been concerned with for quite some time, or it's air quality or health benefits. These are all things that more and more often planners are being asked to help solve at the community level. So you'll see things in general plans that they may have some sort of urban a green print, as well as the blueprint was part of the regional COG started doing the blueprint. Yeah, so which now turned into SB 375, and I did want to mention that really quickly. So SB 375 requires all of the large MPOs / COGs to come up with plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So they're all looking for strategies, land use transportation strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and they all have to hit state set targets for those. So it's a real opportunity for you all to talk about the benefits of trees and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So I didn't want to.
And so SB 375, that came out wasn't that right after the Global Warming Solution Act? Wasn't that like 2007 or 8? Chuck, do you remember 375? When it came out right before I got to Sacramento Tree Foundation. 2008.
375. 2008. So it was interesting that, I don't know if you've heard Cindy mention, but the number one thing was beautification. And I would say that it's not because planners don't understand the other multiple benefits of trees. It's just, it's pretty universally recognized that trees make things prettier. So it's not saying that they don't understand that, it's Andy was talking about last night. It's not that they don't understand that trees play a much larger role in addressing environmental health. It's just that, of course, they're beautiful.
Let me make a comment on that. I was at a CUFAC meeting, which is, you got NUCFAC and then you got CUFAC. You got nuts and cracks all over the place. But CUFAC is the California Urban Forest Advisory Council, and I had just gotten the results of this, and I'd seen that it was, more for beautification than anything else. And I'm going, what happened? And John Sway, who is an urban planner in San Francisco and who helped an awful lot on the Prop E work and the development of a plan in San Francisco, looked at me and he said, that's because planners are there to make their communities happy. And communities want their places to, and he said, you can say it's beautification. The other term that they throw around a lot now is a sense of place, right? So that is why that is number one. They are literally trying to please their customers, is an interesting way of putting at it. But then it's also kind of like some of the inclusive language we've learned recently. It's not either or, it's and. So we need to start saying we want beautification and urban heat island thing. It doesn't have to be just a one. So right. Say and. And
another of, we're actually also trying to work with our county health planners, our county health officers and the public health folks. Our California Planning Roundtable came out with something called Social Determinants of Health, and we've been working really hard to find common ground with them too. So this kind of the idea of human health benefits is another area where planners are really trying to find overlap, and that we share common goals, as I think you all do too with the health issues. What human health includes? Well, I think that you're right. It's really broad, and I think it goes all the way from mental health and thinking about trauma-informed communities, all the way to getting people to be more active, to walk more. It impacts goes into climate change because it talks about the health impacts of a hotter environment. So whether it's folks having issues with heat, suffering from heat-related issues.
And the degradation in air quality when you've got the higher heats. We're already, asthma, absolutely.
So I think that it would be, I think one of the areas we could collaborate together is trying to flesh that out a little bit more. Right.
Joanne? Here. Thank you for eating the mic.
Trying to be considerate of the webinar. I want to ask you, you're based where? In
Sacramento.
Sacramento, okay. We have a problem in Los Angeles. We have 135 people in the planning department in Los Angeles. People who know me, I'm an activist. I'm at City Hall. I'm at a lot of meetings where the planning department comes. I was on the working group for the Urban Forestry Management Plan. And I find that we need a huge education in that department. And I would like to ask you how we can educate the planners, because they are not considering trees. I just listened to a webinar Wednesday night, and they were really, the questions I asked were answered very uninformatively, and they didn't even know what the sidewalk repair program was. They thought I was just fixing my sidewalk. They didn't understand that huge amounts of money are being spent to remove trees. And while we've been trying to put the brakes on that, one of our biggest obstacles is the planning department and building and safety, because they haven't been considering the existing trees. And when they do replanting projects, we have one at LAUSD at a school now where they're going to remove 48 trees, and the planting project is pathetic. They're removing 70-foot redwoods this summer. So we need to have some education in these planning departments. What can you propose to educate these planners, many of whom are consultants?
So we will be, at the end of the presentation, we'll be talking a little bit about some ideas that we have and then opening it up for ideas from you all. I will say that one of the biggest challenges in large cities is that the responsibilities are divided up. So public works may be looking at sidewalks, planners may not be looking at sidewalks. The school district's looking at schools, planners may not be looking at schools. And so it's a much broader than just educating the planners, unfortunately, because it's also educating planning commissioners and elected officials and other departments as well. But certainly, from my perspective, we can start with planners, and we'll be talking about some of those ideas in a little bit.
Okay. Deb, okay. Igor? Didn't know he was going to get his 10,000 steps in today, did he?
Thank you. Following along Joanne's question, do you have recommendations, or are there statewide recommendations of the best types of decisions that planners need to make that we could use as a template, even though I understand there's geographical and municipal specifications that change, that we could take, and no matter who we're talking to, whether it's the Board of Public Works or planners or whatever sub-department happens to be doing it, we could use and say, here's our platform, whatever department you're in, whatever planners you're using or consultants, we'd like you to stick to these. I feel like we're all trying to figure this out separately, and it seems like if we have a best management practice, it's like a template from the state that we can adopt and adapt as needed, that would be really helpful.
That's going to be one of our suggestions at the end. I do want to say that National APA does have some information on their website. In their they have a series called PAS, PAS, and they do have something from a couple of years ago now that it might be a good starting place. And I also will say that when I was at UC Davis Extension, we worked with Ray to develop a tree-friendly certification for new development, and I know that they're in the process of finalizing that. So I'm hopeful that will provide some guidance too. Think, Ray? Yeah. So, but no, I think that's actually, I think, a great suggestion, and one of the things that Cindy and I have been talking about.
Yeah, the book on urban forestry that the Planning Association put out was in 2009, so it may need to be revisited. I'm not sure. So, but that's one place to start.
And I love checklists. So if you can do a checklist for somebody, great.
Okay.
Going on?
Yep.
All right, so we asked both groups what the barriers were to planting trees.
It's a little hard to read. Okay, the type's a little small. So from the left, the biggest is maintenance funding. How many people agree with that? Everybody, right? Yep. The second is infrastructure conflicts. Everybody agree with that? Yep. And so it was interesting. Those two are the biggest ones. And then there's a steep drop off before you get to business resistance, because we've heard of people that didn't want trees in front of their signs. Drought, water shortage, or that means, they just can't afford to water the tree. And then no room. That was a highly scientific category I threw in there. Just to say, there's no room to put a tree, because that's what you hear. It's been compacted out, right? So those did not really hold water, not to make environmental jokes. So maintenance funding and infrastructure conflicts. Maintenance funding means doing advocacy at the local level. I have sat in state meetings with people from Strategic Growth Council or the governor's office of OPR, Office of Planning and Research, and said, when can we force cities to take care of their trees? I want a law from the state that says they have to take care of their trees, and it just doesn't work that way. And they can put in recommendations in their general plan guidelines, and they have, but that doesn't force it. So that is going to mean advocacy at the local level. And then as far as infrastructure conflicts, in some ways, I think of this as a technical thing. I am not an arborist. I am not a sidewalk specialist. I do think that this has got, but what do you think about infrastructure conflicts?
I think that it's a thing, but there are certainly lots of, we have developed ways, strategies to get around the infrastructure challenges. Sacramento has a lot of really wonderful old neighborhoods with very large trees that have messed the sidewalks up, and they have all sorts of interesting ways now of getting around it. I almost feel like the challenge is more that people don't want the cost, so they see it as a challenge when they're putting the infrastructure in and the trees. So yes, there are infrastructure challenges.
But you're saying it gets value engineered out to.
Yeah. And I do want to say one more thing. Something that the tree folks rated more highly than I think they rated it more highly than the planners was neighbor resistance. And maybe that's because they work more closely at the neighborhood level. Yeah, no, but there's also neighbor resistance. Yeah, and I do think that goes back to the idea that that planners are working more closely with businesses, and the problem with that is, as you all probably know, is that they don't want trees blocking their signs. So either they don't want trees or they plant little tiny lollipop trees.
Actually, I have a comment. Ann Fankner, California Urban Forest Council, Sacramento chapter. Our most recent speaker, rock star, Scott Aldenhoff, he's the urban forester for the city of Eugene, Oregon. And I asked him to come down because the city of Eugene has been looking at a variety of sidewalk replacement materials. And I said, hey, can we learn from your struggles? 8 years they've been looking at a variety of, and so he came down and to synthesize it all, there's really a product that they really like. It's called, oh my gosh, I just stopped, don't stop or stop, drop, I'll look it up. But basically it's a hinge that's installed in the sidewalk during installation, and it just costs pennies on the dollar. And as if there's a sidewalk lift, it hinges, it lifts up, and it keeps that consistency. And I'd be happy to show anybody what this product looks like during the break if you like.
We can also send it out to everybody, just to make sure that you have it as a potential solution.
It was
Amelia?
And I was just also going to say at his presentation that he gave that every situation had its own solution. So they take it all in a case by case. There's not one they're not going to invest in one particular product because they've done that in the past, and it doesn't work in every scenario. So he went through like so many different cases. Yes.
Well, and I think that one of the challenges, I know at least in Sacramento, is that the homeowner is responsible for their sidewalk. So that they have to pay to have it replaced, yeah. So that gets into that neighborhood resistance. Oh, I did want to say, Cindy, that I think that it would be great if we could somehow create a resource page with all these great ideas and all this information for planners, for working with planners, so that we can send it out and direct planners to all these great ideas.
So just a process question. Do you guys want to keep taking questions? You've got about until 11:15. So you tell me, do you want to run through your slides and then take questions, or do you want to keep going the way we've been going?
Tell you what, we have quite a few slides to get through. So why don't you guys write down your questions, just remember them, and we'll come back to it.
And we'll go through it quickly.
We'll speed it up.
All right, this is you, Cindy.
Okay, so why connect with planners? It's kind of like what I talked about earlier, that there's a lot of pressures in the urban environment between compact development, between drought and how to water this, and the fact that we're doing a lot more infill nowadays because we are trying to protect against sprawl. You've got a governor now who is saying that we have to build a lot more housing. Just talking to my Lyft driver, he was talking about how many places we're going up to build. So there's a lot more, I think the word somebody's using is densification going on, and how do we protect having trees in those situations. So as far as how do we do it, the planners are the ones who are dealing with this, so we have to partner with them to be involved if that's what is happening in your community. They are thinking sustainability in urban heat islands, so to me this is a chance to, an appropriate moment to connect. This is the biggest thing. They understand city processes and ordinances and all sorts of things. As a nonprofit urban forest person coming into this, I don't think you studied public policy in college, did you? I didn't. I studied art history, for crying out loud. So in working on an ordinance in Elk Grove, we were dealing with community input that said, oh, we love trees, but we don't want you to control our trees, right? There was a lot of that like property rights thing, even though they profess to be tree lovers. And in the end, the planner came up with a solution that would never have occurred to me, and it was great. It protected the trees, but I would never have known. So that's why if you can get them on your side, they're there all the time. It's really top down and bottoms up. You need to be talking to the planners. You need to be talking to the elected officials, so they're making it a priority in the planning office. That's what Ray taught me. You've got to have the elected officials because they can pressure the city departments.
I really want to say something about the densification. So SB 50, I don't know if you've heard about this legislation from Senator Wiener. It's going to SB 50 from Senator Wiener, and it's in suspense now, but he's very committed to bringing it back. And it would basically override local planning. They say it won't, but it would override local planning and zoning and say that you could increase density near transit or near bus stops, but also along transit routes. So, for instance, 95% of the residential lots in San Francisco would be impacted and could be upzoned or could become more dense. So you could tear down a house and put in 4 units pretty much anywhere in the city. So this is a huge issue for planners, not only because we can't plan because we wouldn't know what people were going to do, but also because as communities become more dense, they become less livable. People are less happy with them. And so we're going to be in the position, if this passes, where we have to find solutions to maintain the livability of these communities as they densify. And I think trees and green space become incredibly important in these situations. So,
just a quick question. Friends of the Urban Forest, have you guys been dealing with this? I mean, you guys, we've always liked Wiener, right?
Yeah. I mean, planners, John Sway, you guys mentioned, but there are issues. Having a unit in their back or expanding their home, the footprint's happening everywhere. But Wiener issue, we haven't really
It's not necessary. I mean, the reality is that we need housing in California, right? We desperately need housing, affordable. Yes, I know. That's a whole nother. And for a lot of planners, it's a moral issue. We need to provide homes for people. So it's not to say that we're not supportive of that. It's just that there are a lot of issues that need to be dealt with as that happens, and we want to make sure that it's a comprehensive approach. That's all. And so I think that it would be really useful for you all, particularly if you have a relationship with Wiener, to help him and his staff understand that it's not just about, you can't just go in and build housing. You have to plan for a community to make it
Livable.
continuous, livable, yeah, and sustainable. Oh, all right. So I think that there are lots of opportunities for us to work together, as I was saying, whether it's densification or ecosystem services. I have to admit that planners have been a little slow on the uptake with this idea of ecosystem services, integrating them into their plans. But I think that trees provide a great, because so many planners value trees and think that they're important for a lot of different reasons, it's kind of an inroad to focus on ecosystem services. And so that would be a great area that we could collaborate together on. Disadvantaged communities, I heard a lot of you work with disadvantaged communities, planting trees. This is a huge issue for us. SB 1000 requires us to consider disadvantaged communities in our general plans and engage them effectively to make sure that they're represented. So I think it's a great opportunity to work with you all to engage these communities about the kinds of development and planning they want to see in their communities. Climate change, I was listening to people talk about Ray and how Ray has moved from energy, trees save energy, to trees are a way to address climate change issues, and I think that's really important. I'm not sure it's going to work in some of our more conservative communities, but it's a back door to address climate change in some of the communities that are more resistant to talking about climate change. So how can we, as someone mentioned before, are there best practices out there? Is there a checklist? I absolutely think that we can collaborate to develop something like that that can be used to help planners. Planners love models. They want roadmaps. And I think that working together, we can develop something not only for them, but also to help you understand what to ask for. I think that oftentimes the language can be really challenging, and what you need to ask for, what you want, to get what you want, you need to know how to ask for it in plannerese. And so I definitely think there's a way for us to collaborate to create those kind of guidance, best practices, and checklists. I never met a checklist I didn't like. Except maybe the one at the end of CEQA, but that's a Schedule G, but that's another. All right, and partnering for funding. As I said, we don't really have that much money. We have resources, we have people, we have all of these planners who are desperate for education credits. So it's a great opportunity for us to develop materials and webinars and workshops that they can participate in. As Andy was talking about the resiliency workshop they did here, or event, 120, 140 people turned up in the rain. So not only do people want the credits, but to be honest with you, we have planning like every other profession. We have a lot of aging planners and we have a lot of young planners. And they are in the profession. I mean, all planners are overly idealistic. We all got into the profession to change the world. But a lot of the older planners have gotten a little jaded, I have to admit. But we have a whole bunch of new, young, diverse planners coming into the profession who are idealistic, and they want APA, like they want their jobs to reflect their values. And so it's we as APA are trying really hard to allow them to use their profession to change the world. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us to collaborate and find resources to work together to kind of fulfill that broader vision. And to me, trees are an expression of that vision, in that trees are not only good for people, but they're good for the environment. Like they are a symbol of sustainability in my mind because they accomplish so many environmental goals, but they also accomplish so many social goals as well.
So she's saying get them while they're young. And
thank you for translating.
But the other thing is that, I mean, I've noticed at the Sacramento chapter that they do a really good job of developing their young people. They have programs for their young planners. And so that might be, if you have to do something, maybe you get involved with the young planners group and get them while they're young. The other thing I'll say is in talking to a high-tech company in Silicon Valley, and we were talking about whether or not they would give money to urban trees, this woman said, well, we don't have any money, we're just a startup, but let me tell you what's happening. And she was over 50, and she said, we need a whole bunch of, young people to hire on because, again, the aging out. And she said, and the young people now are different. She said, they want the community service, they want the community value to be exhibited by the company that they work for. And they're demanding it. Like when they look at a company and the company says they do community service, and they give back, the millennials apparently will go online and somehow determine in their own way whether it's authentic community service. So I'm just saying, hey, we're authentic. We might not have the big bucks, but we're authentic. So leverage that.
So one of the groups you're talking about is our mentorship program, and they do a community service project every year. And it's been around for I think 8 years, and I think of 3 or 4 of those years they've planted trees with the Sacramento Tree Foundation. That's been the thing they've chosen to do.
Aha. Okay, next one.
Oh.
BFFs.
Okay.
That was yours.
This is me again?
Yeah, well, this is kind of all of it. Some of the things that they said, and we're going to zip through this because you
Okay.
can read.
Yeah.
More communication and engagement. They want earlier engagement with the urban forest crowd.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and I know that means more pressure on the nonprofit, but we'll get to that. Information on how to successfully integrate. Best practices, we've already talked about that. Collaborative trainings. There was quite a few of the comments that said, we need to have more training on this, and then how to work on homeowners and business.
And this idea of identifying trees, having information about they really want to know what the best trees are to plant.
I switched it.
Thank you, that's okay.
Okay. And I'm just going to make a side note. This was a Google survey. How many of you are using Google surveys now? Okay, I have to tell you that I hadn't used a Google survey. I'd been using something else, but this makes it very clear. You know how Google, we hear that they know everything about you? Well, so do the Google surveys, right? I mean, you can get you usually have to ask for the email, and they put in their name or they put in the region, and then you've got all their comments. So the other thing I thought that we could use this for is that there are some people who were very open, and I should make sure that that region, that person that's there in San Diego, you should be talking to that person, right? So I'm going to use this as a stepping stone out of those 119 people. But I'm just kind of letting you know, if you do a Google survey for us in the future, we know who you are if you put down your name, right? Or if you put in your email. I just thought you should know.
Yeah. So this is actually a quote, and several of the planners did say, come talk to us. Like, we want to engage. And I think it's really important. I mean, you all can read this, but is that planners have, and this is just their mindset, whether it's right or wrong, they have all of these things they have to do, all these regulations they have to follow, all these boxes they have to check. Do not ask them to come to your table and play in your sandbox. You need to go to their sandbox. I'm sorry, but it's true, because they aren't able to get over the sides they aren't able to crawl out of theirs. So, but they are hungry for information. They want to collaborate, and we will try to create a space to make that easier, but they are always open for you to come and talk to them.
And so that means that you can go talk to them, and if you don't know the answer, you look at them and you say, we don't know the answer, but we're going to go find out, and we'll be back, if it's something too technical. So it's kind of like Ray used to say, make yourself a resource to these just like you can make yourself a resource to an elected official, you can make yourself a resource to a planner. And then we're going to get to the other thing. Oh, the next one, sometimes there were mixed messages, and this is more about education. Here we are talking about urban heat island. We had 2 different comments. One person saying, carbon sequestration and urban heat island are a nice story, but quantitative benefit is small. And I kind of went, whoa, and then somebody else says, people don't understand the huge benefits of urban heat island. So there's some education to be done. You need to do that. You're
Yes,
an education
yes,
person. Yeah,
we can help with that.
And then natives versus non-natives. I said all over. I meant everybody throughout the state, we had people said, plant natives, plant non-natives. It was all over the map, right? And we're saying you should be planting a whole bunch of different types of trees because natives might not necessarily be that particular solution. All right, let's keep going. This is the other big thing, urban forest community concerns. Funding. Did I not do it? There it is. Okay. There was the comment that central issue is bandwidth, limited staff time and resources. Funding would help us make this shift. This is an unfunded activity. I guess as far as could be a part of AB 1530 planning initiative, that's referring to the recent change to the Urban Forestry Act where we said that we were going to set canopy goals for regions. It's not likely to be funded through CAL FIRE, not at this rate. So I believe that education is a key part of everything urban forest groups do, and that working with the city and the planners is a way to hit a lot of people at once if you can change laws or if you can change guidelines or ordinances. So I hear that there's the pain of bandwidth, but we have to consider bang for your buck is the other thing. So, and I keep saying, you can educate a bunch of volunteers and then they keep moving on. Maybe they go to college and they decide to go to the Amazon, right? But if you change the laws in your town, or if you get that in your own town, it sticks. So the next thing is some solutions. Flip to the next one. Southern California. I'm going to call out Sustainable Claremont because Sustainable Claremont said that we have a regular meeting with our city manager. And it's like the other thing that Julia said, and I admit I'm not a policy person, she said, when it comes to funding, when you're sitting there talking about maintenance money, you have some cities that have strong mayors, right? And that mayor can help control the budget. And then you have cities that are, more of them are not strong cities. And who controls the budget? City manager. So, that was something that came up in this. There's like not just talking to your planner, it's talking to the city manager. So at some point we can talk more about what's going on with your manager. But we talked about guidelines to help the conversation. We already went over that. Then this one was interesting. It wasn't the planners, it was the public works and building inspectors who need to be educated. And we have Climate Action Now in the room who, there he is, who's working with public works a lot. And so does Doug and Fuff. Be tenacious as heck. It's true. And then about personal relationships. It is all about personal relationships.
It's about personal relationships, but then it's about finding ways to institutionalize those personal relationships so when people leave, they don't disappear. And that I realize that's a huge challenge, but.
A couple other ideas were, we have nonprofits that go from really big, like Sacramento Tree Foundation and Tree People, to kitchen table nonprofits. And there's quote unquote staff, there's quote unquote board. Sometimes it's just all board. It just depends. But I want you to think about who's on your board, and are you strategically planning your board so that it's not like Andy Lipkus was talking about long-haired hippie types. It's not just your long-haired hippie type friends. It might be a guy who was a planner. It might be somebody who's a real estate developer. You should look at, if you're a smaller organization and you're concerned about this, I hope you're going to the network member sites and looking who's on their board. I was doing that for California ReLeaf because I was saying who should be on our board, and I went and I looked at FUF's people, who's on FUFs. I went and looked at who's on Sacramento Tree Foundations, and you get a completely different picture in some cases. Some people have got a lot of corporate types, big corporate types. I think tree peoples tend to be people who can donate big money. Ray's got a business kind of oriented group where he didn't even want any tree people on his board. He's got an advisory council for that. He wanted people in the community that wanted to make change to the community because we're not a tree group, we're a community change organization. So I want you to rethink this and go out and get the people that you need to meet the planners.
Right, or create an advisory group of those folks. If you need people on your board who are going to give big money, then create an advisory board of community folks who are involved in the community.
Okay, what time is it? And this one thing, educate all staff and board on local planners and city politics. you know, it doesn't hurt for people to know how this works. We were there last year when we did Lobby Day in Sacramento, and everybody in the room at the breakfast reception was nervous as all get out about going and talking to Capitol, on the Capitol, right? And then that afternoon, they were going, and I'm going to quote Carla, who said, not Carla Short, but who said, I had no idea that's how this worked, you know? So it was, and she said, this is much easier than talking to people about getting the right tree, is to go ask them, you know, that we need funding for whatever thing we were asking for on it. So educate them about how to do this, because they can use this in whatever nonprofit they go to. And then lastly, public policy college students. We want you to make sure that you pay them and you give them substantive, meaty projects. If you're going to pull in a public policy person and say, hey, as an intern, we want you to go develop a relationship or something like that, you know, make sure that it's serious and you're not having them Xerox. Chuck told me that. He didn't want us to have people Xeroxing paper. So.
Hashtag no Xerox.
Photocopying. We're not supposed to say Xerox anymore. Hashtag no photo. Okay, and we're going to open this up. So just the last thing. Coming soon, the ReLeaf educational resources on this, which are directed primarily at urban forest people, not the urban planners, although now we have the suggestion from Julia, is podcast. It occurred to me that you guys drive off to planting events all the time, so you can't watch a video doing that, but you could listen to a podcast. So websites, webinars, Twitter feeds. The survey comments by region, I'm not going to out people, you know, but I do want to do it by region and say, these were the comments that we got, so we're going to make that a resource as well. I think the other thing that I heard in the comments from the urban forest groups was, you know, help us do this. And it almost sounded like talking points or sound bites or quotes. Who can we quote that will help you make your case? Urban Heat Island research. We've been asked a lot about this. We've already been collecting things about that, about what are the death rates? What are the sciences saying? And then everybody was asking for case studies. So that was kind of new, but we're going to try and come up with that a little bit later on. But that's coming this summer. Now, go back to, somebody had a comment earlier on. Lori Bradling had a comment. Whoops.
Okay, so let's be very efficient with our comments.
Back on infrastructure conflicts, one of the major ones I've encountered is power lines, overhead power lines. It affects not only where you can plant trees, but maintenance issues, which then goes into fire issues, right, which is a major set of issues. And it's a black box to me how planners, especially municipalities, interact with utilities. It seems like it's a great opportunity to improve things, to get a better harmonization, if you will, in that area. And I've never been able to figure it out, and I sure could use some help.
I had another comment. I've seen a collision taking place with solar and trees. I'm noticing a lot of big trees coming down because the solar companies are saying that you're going to lose a tremendous amount of efficiency with the shade cover of a tree. And also, you know, forthcoming is the new building regulations where all new homes are going to have solar panels. That's going to certainly impact where trees can be planted. I don't know if that's going to be addressed, but that could have a major impact.
Yep. Was there somebody else up? No? Okay.
Glenn Bailey. One of the challenges that I think not only city planners have, but anyone dealing with the city government, and I'm specifically talking about the city of Los Angeles, is the city attorney and the whole mentality of the city is risk adverse. Their favorite phrase is an abundance of caution, out of an abundance of caution, which translates into do nothing. You know, plant the smallest tree you can if you have to plant a tree. Anyway, so the question is, have you run in, I didn't see anything about legal constraints, legal concerns in the survey and how that affects the cities moving forward with thinking outside the box of different treatments besides something the way they've been doing it for the past 100 years, which is pour concrete, you know, around and leave very little room around the trunk of a tree.
I think oh.
Two Rachels in one row. Rachel Malrich. On the plannerese aspect, I'm just wondering what infrastructure conflict, when you see that word, what that brings to mind for you. Obviously, a lot of us are dealing with sidewalk repair and power lines, those kind of issues. But for me, when I think about planning and if it's infrastructure conflict, I think about new development and having everything else go first and a 4x4 cut go at the end, rather than looking at, let's put in, 4 crepe myrtle or 1 large stature tree. So what does infrastructure conflict come to mind when you're thinking from the planning perspective?
So infrastructure conflicts would be all the things you mentioned, as well as sewer and water lines and roads. There is also been some problems in Sacramento with sudden limb drop or near playgrounds, and there have been some fatalities around that. So unfortunately, that's an infrastructure conflict. I don't so much think of new development as an infrastructure conflict. I think of that as, but yeah, thank you.
I wanted to ask if you are contemplating any way of inventorying the trees in the area that's being planned, so that what we find is that in LA they do clear cutting and then they start to think about trees maybe at the very end or maybe somewhere in the planning stage, because they're going to put sporadic trees, but they're not thinking about the 10 years before those trees grow, that the ecosystem services are gone. So what we're trying to do is get our planners, probably pretty unsuccessfully, to require developers to inventory what's there and see what they can preserve before they even start to think about a plan.
Developers are another thing altogether. I mean, I can remember being in some discussions in one of the towns, and people were saying, well, they're going to cut down the trees before they even talk about the development because they don't want to run into the... So it's almost like you need...
So there are cities that have heritage tree ordinances where you have to preserve certain types of trees, and then you just have to be vigilant, because sometimes they'll sneak in the middle of the night and cut them down, and you need to increase fines and make sure that if they do that, then they have to mitigate really heavily.
Can I speak now? There are 2 areas that I'd like to comment on what your presentation. Number 1, I think tree planning should be in a part of infrastructure. And that is an educational thing that has to be done, but it needs to be done. Then the other comment I have to make is that Eagle County has a very good plan and has capitalized already on your presentation about checklists. We have checklists, and if you as a proponent coming to the county to present a project, you can easily use the checklist and very economically pursue the route through permitting. If you comply with all of the checklist, if you can say yes, yes, yes to everything, it cuts down on your expenses tremendously. Education is the key.
Okay, so final 2 comments, and before we take those, I would like all of my afternoon speakers to line up over there, because you guys will be the first in the line for lunch. But we do have 2 more comments. So yeah, afternoon speakers, that means you. Go to the back of the room.
First of all, I want to thank you very much. It happened to be much more relevant than I thought, actually. Great presentation, a lot of questions addressed, but a hint was here, like every one of us should kind of struggle with it on our own with our local planners. So I would put this way, how we can affect that all together as our community there and our professional community. And to that, it's probably about the mindset of planners. So, and that needs to be changed, that they would set sufficient put sufficient priority on the trees. And this is kind of rational, but that should get in their bones. So how we can affect that. And one specific thing to that, maybe some like courses or specializations at colleges about urban planning. And if you give us that to our workforce development, a lot of our community students going to the college. So, okay, that would be reliable for the trees planting with that specialization kind of. So,
I will say that I was talking to somebody about this, and they said that the school they went to, planning, urban forestry, and engineering were all under the same college. And I thought that that was really interesting. I don't know how common that is.
Okay, and our final comment.
Oh, there's another one, but so mine's not a comment, but more of a question. So on one of the slides, you talked about the resistance of businesses and citizens to green infrastructure as not the biggest concern, but still a big one at 30%. And how do we as community-based organizations use our relationships with planners, and planners use their relationships with city officials, policymakers, to take all that information, that feedback that we get from the residents to either change that mind or increase the affordable housing? Do you have abilities to actually report back what you say and impact those kind of perceptions?
I think that that is on a list of things we can work on together. I think that's absolutely something that we should work on together, because I think that that's a huge value to planners, is to have that connection and start educating businesses and residents about the importance of trees. Yes, we need to do that.
Hi, Nancy Hughes, California Urban Forest Council. What comes to mind for me, and you brought it up here most recently, Julia, that there are a lot of cities that have the policies, already on the books that could be helpful to other cities that don't have them, and most of the other cities don't have them. So if there's a way in the information you're collecting to turn to I'm going to use Palo Alto as an example. They do a lot of things right. So to turn to these policies already that influence how the planners make decisions, I think that'll get a lot of communities a long way down the road. And just shameless promotion of our Urban Forest Management Plan Toolkit that's free for people to get into a lot of the good information and a lot of resources that already exist, and you can look at what other communities are doing.
And I would say, too, that if all of these resources, if we can somehow collect them and share them with planners, that would be great. And one more thing about those case stories studies, model ordinances are very useful to planners, but then I think include some data or talking points with them about why those ordinances are good, so they can sell them to their city manager or their council or their planning director.
Yeah, a lot of times you see when we were working on that ordinance in Elk Grove, they were doing this big matrix about who else had tree ordinances, because they all want to see what somebody else has done before they commit themselves. So that might be a follow-up survey where we send out